Towey was a born liar. When his parents got divorced, he told everyone that he lived with his dad on the weekends at a llama farm, and that he had a water slide that went from his bedroom window to a pool. We were gullible 10-year-olds, but even then we all decided that Towey was full of shit. But Towey stuck by his story, and none of us were ever invited to his dad's house, so we could never call him out on it. It was almost admirable in a way, that type of devotion to lying. So even though I admired Towey in a weird way, I also never trusted a single word he said. Not as kids on the playground, and not in the few times we'd spoken in the last 15 years. Towey was fun to hang out with, but there was always this distance between us. I've known him for a long time now, but I've never felt like I've really known him. It was also an actor, and the world was a stage, or however that expression goes. So when Towey called me out of the blue a few weeks ago and wanted to talk about the red light in the warehouse, I figured it was all part of Towey's theater of life. I hadn't thought about the red light in the warehouse in years. It was just something stupid from our past, something that was a big deal as kids, but as adults, you just shake your head and chuckle. I know now how wrong I was. Towey suggested we meet for drinks back in our hometown, even though neither of us had been back there in years. He said it was important, so I drove the 3 hours to our old stomping grounds. We sat across from each other in a small booth at a rundown bar, and right off the bat, I thought Towey looked different. Not just older, but weathered. Nervous, but not the stuttering or sweating type of nervous. Towey looked like a man that thought he was being followed. I almost smiled. Towey's performances were still top-notch, I thought. My old friend immediately cut to the chase. He said he was convinced that thing that lived in the abandoned warehouse with the red light had finally found him. 20 years after Towey had disturbed it, it was back. Now I naturally didn't believe him. I waited for the punchline, for some supernatural twist that would finally give away one of Towey's many lies. I waited for him to tell me that a grinning skeleton floated above his bed, or that he was being awoken in the middle of the night by an icy hand gripping his wrist. I waited for the unbelievable, but Towey's reasoning was much more believable. He looked at me dead in the eyes, and without wavering, he said, "My nightmares are still bathed in red." I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me just back up and give you a little backstory. You see, growing up, Towey and I were fascinated by the old abandoned warehouse on Jackson Avenue. The structure was a cutlery factory back in the 1950s, but that had long since closed by the time we were in elementary school. The property hadn't been used in decades, and the old factory was slowly crumbling away. The bricks were decaying, the fire escape ladder iron was rusted brown, and most of the windows were smashed. The old place was guarded by an 8-foot-tall chain-link fence with barbed wire on top, which gave the building a rather forbidden aurora. But what was exceptionally odd to us kids was the red light that burned in the stairwell on the 3rd floor. It didn't seem to have any business being there, but it shone every night through the empty window frame like a watchful red eye. Just a lonely light bulb that never seemed to die. The 16 other windows on the north side of the warehouse were blacked out, but every night the 3rd floor stairwell was doused in crimson. Well, explaining it now sounds rather mundane. It was the most ordinary of things, really, just a red light bulb that burned in the stairwell of an abandoned warehouse. Like I said, ordinary. But we were kids, where even the most ordinary things could be fantastic. and so we made it fantastic. To some, it was a secret vampire lair. To others, it was a murder factory for kids with too many detentions. Occult meetings, werewolf breeding, the evil spirit of a janitor that slit his own throat. Imagine a yarn about the stairwell with the red light, and some kid in our town probably spun it around a campfire. Everyone believes something different, but there was one thing that all of us agreed on. No one would ever go into the abandoned warehouse. Not unless they had a death wish. And Towey apparently had a death wish, and so did his brother. We were 12 years old when Towey announced to everyone that he was moving to Oregon with his mom and brother Jake. Towey said that Jake had recently explored the warehouse in the middle of the night, and it had messed him up real good. They were taking him to a special clinic across the country, and they had to live there. "He's pretty disturbed," Towey said. "Jake saw something in there, but he won't tell us what he saw. He just kind of shakes. He's always looking around the room like something's following him." As usual, I thought Towey was full of shit. I didn't believe he was leaving for Oregon, and I certainly didn't believe his 8-year-old brother had gone haunted warehouse exploring. But Towey kept on insisting, and none of our friends believed him. Not about Jake, and not about moving. Even the night before Towey claimed he was moving, I still didn't believe him. "I'll prove it to you," Towey told me. "Meet me outside the warehouse at midnight." And so I did. I snuck out through my window and crisscrossed through yards until I arrived at the decrepit warehouse. The red light in the 3rd floor stairwell glowed menacingly. I waited alone, and I studied the cursed building. Something moved 3 windows down from the stairwell. Something dark. It barely flickered in my vision, but it was there. I backed up, wondering if it was Towey playing a trick on me, or maybe it was someone else, or something else. "Hey man," Towey's voice cut through the silence of the night, and he rounded the corner of Jackson Avenue. I swallowed hard, and Towey jogged up to me. "This is my last night," Towey said. "This is my chance to check out the warehouse. Maybe I could figure out why my brother is so messed up." I pleaded with Towey not to go in there. See, we all knew the stories. There was something terrible in that warehouse. Something people aren't meant to see. I told him I thought I saw something moving in there a little bit ago, and Towey just shrugged. "I won't get another chance," Towey said. "I'm leaving tomorrow." And with that, Towey wiggled underneath a small gap between the chain-link fence and the hard ground, and he slowly crept towards the warehouse. I put both hands on the fence, about to plead with him once again, but no words came. I actually smirked. This is Towey's grand finale. I remember thinking, his brother isn't sick, but his family probably is moving, and Towey just wants to give us something to remember him by. If Jake was really screwed up, there's no way Towey would walk in the same certain horror and doom. He's playing us. Again. An expression popped into my head. Something my dad would say about some yahoo at work who always took his jokes too far. "Showman until the very end," I whispered to myself. I watched that magnificent liar crawl into a broken 1st floor window, and then he disappeared. I couldn't hear Towey's footsteps, only crickets in the suburban night. The red light pulsated. After a few minutes, I saw a figure appear on the 1st floor stairwell. It could have been Towey. It could have been something else. Moments later, a dark figure emerged in the 2nd floor stairwell, and then vanished. Seconds seemed like minutes. Even though it was Towey's greatest performance, he still shouldn't have been in there. What he was doing was suicide. Every kid in town would agree. The red light throbbed, and I waited for Towey to appear in the 3rd floor stairwell. Worst-case scenarios flooded my mind. I saw a cloaked madman clutching a blade, or a disheveled woman in a white dress with pale skin. I saw blood spurting out of the empty window like a red mist, only to vanish into the air. I shook off my morbid fantasies, and then I saw Towey in the empty window frame. I was positive it was him. He was wearing the hoodie with Force Football printed on the back. I waited for him to turn and give me the thumbs up, or maybe make a goofy face, but he just stood in the third-floor stairwell with his back to me, staring at something unseen. He was bathed in red. I wanted to yell out to him, but I couldn't. I just whispered Towey's name as loud as I could to get his attention. But either he didn't hear me, or he was unable to turn. The pop of the light bulb made me jump, and I heard shards of glass sprinkle the ground from inside the brick-and-mortar monster in front of me. The red light in the stairwell extinguished. There was nothing but blackness in the warehouse, and I couldn't see my friend. I was frozen in place. My feet felt rooted into the ground. I gripped the fence, and although I lay in bed later that night with red marks on my hands and my fingers slightly throbbing from clutching the chain link, I didn't feel the sting at that moment. I waited for Towey's scream and for him to come rushing outside, but there was nothing. I'm not sure how long I stood like that, but I eventually found myself on the ground. I hugged my legs into my chest and rocked myself back and forth. I considered running for help, and I also considered going in there after Towey like some movie hero. But instead, I just sat there like a coward. As I slowly rocked on the sidewalk, I simultaneously cursed Towey's name and apologized to him at the same time. I felt like whatever was happening to him in that warehouse was my fault, and that he probably was telling the truth. His brother probably did stupidly explore that cursed place, and Towey was probably stupidly trying to make it right somehow. And I should have tried harder to stop him. The shaking on the chain link fence jarred me back to reality. Towey wiggled underneath the gap in the fence and climbed to his feet. I jumped up and hugged him. "What the hell happened in there?" I said. Towey shook his head. "I didn't see anything. Nothing at all. But I saw you staring." "I didn't see anything." There was fear in Towey's face. As usual, I thought Towey was lying. He did see something. We walked home in silence, and Towey moved away the next day. I'm not sure when the red light was replaced, because I was too scared to walk by the old warehouse for weeks. But the next time I mustered up the courage to check it out, the red light was back. I'm not sure who replaced it. Now, I saw Towey sporadically throughout high school. He'd visit his dad a few times a year, and sometimes Towey would call me. Sometimes he wouldn't. But we never talked about the red light in the warehouse. Not once. Towey mainly told lies about his new life. How his mom was dating some movie star, and that Towey had designed some computer software that he was going to sell for millions of dollars. And I always played along. We got older. Towey and I drifted apart, but the memory of that weird night before Towey moved away was still plenty vivid. But I began to think differently about it. What was once undeniably supernatural and macabre became just the imaginations of a bunch of kids. I no longer thought that Towey had seen anything in that warehouse. It was just Towey, the fantastic liar, just one of Towey's pranks. As an adult, I felt stupid to ever believe it in the first place. But as I sat across the table from Towey all those years later in our hometown pub, I reconsidered. Towey also appeared genuine, so heartfelt, so broken. I couldn't help but to take him seriously. "How can I help?" I asked him. Is there anything I can do?" Towey shook his head. "No, there's nothing anybody can do. I guess I just wanted to talk about it, that's all." "Please, why don't you just tell me? You see, 20 years ago outside that warehouse, you told me that you didn't see anything. But tonight, you said you disturbed something. If it's found you, then we need to do something." Now, I said that without knowing what it meant. It all sounded so crazy. Towey stared into nothing and took a long drink of his beer. "What did you see inside that warehouse?" I asked. Towey looked down at his drink. His fingers danced across the glass. He thought about my question for a very long time. "I didn't see anything," Towey said. "Can we talk about something else?" And so we bullshitted for a while. Jobs, movies, sports. Until Towey took a call and said he needed to go. We shook hands, and he left. I finished my beer and walked into the parking lot. My old car rumbled to the highway, and then I quickly turned around. Curiosity was getting the better of me. I drove the 10 minutes to Jackson Avenue. I pictured the old warehouse still looking the same and that red light beaming as a beacon of fear. But it wasn't. There was no red light, and the warehouse was now a pile of rubble. I stopped my car and got out. I walked to the fence and I gripped it like I had those many years ago. This time as a grown man. As I looked out over the pile of broken bricks and concrete, it felt like the warehouse was never there at all. What was so clear to me as a child now seemed like false memories. Supernatural things and spooky tales that were so obviously made up. I felt stupid all over again. And I again wondered if Towey was pulling my chain. Maybe he had called me up only to reclaim his status as Towey the Deceiver. Towey, the con artist. Hell, he was probably laughing in his car right now, thinking he pulled another fast one. It's what he was best at. Now, my dreams were bathed in red that night. In my nightmare, I was Towey, frozen in that small stairwell. Sitting on the step in front of me was a man with a ragged beard, surrounded by buckets of blood and dead animal carcasses. The man looks up and his face bubbles, like it had been seared over an open flame on a stovetop. He bares his teeth, and mucus and flesh drip onto the floor. "Don't you ever tell anyone what you saw in here, boy," the man snarls. The red light bulb explodes, and I snap awake, completely drenched in sweat. I washed my face with cold water and cursed Towey's name for giving me nightmares. After all, he was the reason I had shuffled through those memories. But still, I couldn't help but smile. And that's probably what he wanted to happen. Towey the conniver. And I thought that was the end of it for me. My life carried on like normal. No more red dreams, no supernatural stories, just the monotony of my adult life. Work, eat, sleep. It's the ordinary stuff. And then the phone call came a few weeks later. It was Towey's brother, and he had told me that Towey had died. Doctors said he had a brain aneurysm. "I saw him," Jake told me on the phone. His mouth was open and his eyes were frozen in fear. It was like he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. That's weird, but do you know the first thing I thought when I saw him? I thought about that old warehouse back when we were kids. The one with the red light. Do you remember that place? I didn't say anything. I just listened to Jake's troubled breathing, inhale and exhale through my phone. His voice was tinny and distant, lost almost. eyes frozen in fear, Jake said to himself. I know exactly how he felt. I almost didn't believe Towey was really dead, that it was just another one of his lies. But I went to the wake and there he was. Just laying there peacefully, surrounded by flowers, photo boards, and a few of his old things. Now I half expected his corpse to jump out of the casket and yell, "Gotcha!" But that didn't happen. Not even trickster Towey could fake his own death. I went out for drinks after the wake with a few of my old friends. I didn't tell them that I had seen Towey recently, and that we had talked about that damn red light. It just didn't seem right. We just fondly reminisced about our friend Towey, laughing heartedly at all the lies he told us when we were kids. After all, it was just Towey being Towey. The lies were his specialty. And I lay in bed awake for a long time that night, just thinking about all my old friends and all the stories he told that weren't true. But still, I wished he'd told me the truth about the red light in the warehouse. Maybe I could have helped him. But I don't think he would have wanted that. It would have ruined the illusion. It would have ruined the wonder. And then I began to wonder some more. Maybe Towey did have the water slide that every kid dreamed of. Maybe Towey did sell software for millions of dollars. And maybe Towey and Jake did see something awful and terrible in that warehouse. But mainly, I wondered one thing. Who called me on the phone to tell me that Towey was dead? Because it couldn't have been Towey's brother. It just wasn't possible. You see, Towey told me a long time ago that Jake had died right after they moved to that special clinic in Oregon. And I thought about that tinny and distant voice I'd heard over the phone. I saw him. His mouth was open, and his eyes were frozen in fear. It was like he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Whoever it was sounded so lost. And I think I know exactly how he felt. It was like he was calling from a different existence. I pulled my covers up to my shoulders and felt a smile form at the corners of my lips. Even though Towey was dead, he was still making me wonder. A showman till the very end.